Welcome the Lord's chosen. They kept reloading attacks while you kept reloading purpose. Let that sink in, because it's not just poetic, it's prophetic. You see, the average person breaks after 3 consistent hits of opposition. That's a psychological fact, but you've been under spiritual artillery fire for years, and somehow you keep showing up like it's the season finale of a show they can't cancel. They've thrown rumors, resistance, rejection, and replays of betrayal. And yet you've evolved right in front of their confusion. Every plot they designed became your prototype. Every insult became your initiation. You've been underestimated for so long that even your silence started looking suspicious. And let's be honest, some of them are still confused about how you're breathing, smiling, and paying bills with peace instead of payback. You were supposed to collapse, remember? You were supposed to be the afterthought, not the headline. But here you are, walking evidence that resilience has a sense of humor. They built traps thinking you'd fall into them, but somehow you ended up redecorating the pit. You didn't just survive. You remodeled rock bottom and made it look like destiny's Airbnb. Because that's what happens when you're chosen. Your failure looks rehearsed, your pain looks purposeful, and your comebacks start arriving unannounced. So when we say they've attacked you for an extremely long time but still failed miserably, we're not exaggerating. We're documenting the impossible. How someone can be targeted by life itself and still turn chaos into character. This is not a sob story. This is a status update from the trenches. Proof that divine selection doesn't expire, no matter how long the opposition runs the campaign. Now let's break this down. Number 1, they mistook endurance for weakness. They thought because you didn't react, you were powerless. Because you didn't clap back, you were scared. They confused your calm for cowardice and your patience for permission. But what they never understood is that endurance is not the absence of strength. It's the mastery of it. You weren't quiet because you had nothing to say. You were quiet because you had already seen too much to waste your breath on people who can't process depth. Endurance is what separates those who crumble from those who command. It's not glamorous. It's the long nights where you hold your tongue when every part of you wants to scream. It's showing up to places you were once disrespected just to prove that peace looks better on you than revenge ever could. While they were busy performing power, you were practicing it in silence. You learned that sometimes the loudest response is consistency. The truth is they expected you to fold. They built scenarios in their heads where you'd lose your temper, your faith, your focus. But you did something they didn't plan for. You endured. You didn't need to prove your worth with words. You let time do the talking. And time has a way of revealing who was truly in control all along. Endurance makes you unpredictable. It confuses those who rely on chaos to feel powerful. When you refuse to flinch, their entire strategy falls apart. They wanted drama. You gave them discipline. They wanted to see you spiral. You chose structure instead. That's when the energy shifted. They still don't get it. Endurance isn't weakness, it's wisdom that's been tested. It's the strength to sit in the storm and still know it won't last forever. The longer you stayed still, the more their control slipped. Because when you stop reacting, you start rewriting the story, and that's exactly where you took back your power. Number 2, you weren't just surviving, you were being tempered. They thought life was breaking you down, but it was actually building you up. Every trial, every disappointment, every betrayal wasn't just random suffering, it was targeted training. The pain wasn't punishment, it was preparation. While everyone else saw the struggle as destruction, something inside you knew it was construction in disguise. You weren't falling apart. You were being reshaped into someone unrecognizable to your old self. Being tempered means going through intense heat so that weakness burns away and only strength remains. You were thrown into situations meant to expose your limits, But those moments revealed your endurance instead. You discovered a level of resilience that can't be taught, only experienced. You learned how to recover without recognition, how to heal without help, and how to rebuild without applause. That's a power most people will never understand, because it can't be performed. It has to be lived. While others were trying to look strong, you were becoming strong. You didn't need validation to keep going. You just needed vision. That's why you outlasted storms that were designed to finish you. You became grounded in what you believe, focused on what you're called to do, and uninterested in distractions that don't feed your purpose. The fire they thought would end you only refined your direction. They'll never know how many private battles it took to reach this calm, how many nights you wanted to quit but didn't. You were being tempered to handle what's next, not for comfort, but for calling. Every scar became a signature of survival, proof that the process didn't destroy you, it disciplined you. Now you move differently. You don't chase peace, you carry it. You don't fear loss. You understand it's part of alignment. You don't need revenge. You recognize your evolution is enough. Because the truth is, you were never just surviving. You were being sharpened into someone who could never be broken the same way again. Number 3, they fought the image, not the assignment. They went after what they could see, your job, your reputation, your confidence, your relationships, because they had no access to what you were actually carrying. They attacked the surface, unaware that the real power wasn't in your appearance but in your anointing. You were never the threat because of who you seemed to be. You were the threat because of what you were sent to do. And when people don't understand purpose, they start wars against appearances. They mistook your presence for pride, your calling for competition, your peace for arrogance. They couldn't explain why you stood out, so they tried to tear you down. But what they didn't realize is that you're not functioning off popularity. You're functioning off prophecy. Your steps were ordered long before their opinions existed. They attacked what was visible, not realizing the invisible part of you was backed by something untouchable. You were designed to trigger what's dormant in others, and that makes some people uncomfortable. The light you carry exposes laziness in those who prefer shadows. Your confidence reminds them of the courage they never acted on. That's why their attacks were emotional, not logical. They weren't fighting you. They were fighting their reflection in your progress. But divine assignments don't need approval to keep moving. Every time they tried to block you, they only confirmed your importance. Every attempt to isolate you only made your purpose louder. You stopped needing them to understand because you realized understanding wasn't a requirement, alignment was. Now, you've reached a point where their opinions don't weigh anything. You know who sent you, and that awareness alone is protection. They fought the image, but the assignment kept breathing. And when your mission comes from a higher place, no earthly opposition can dismantle it. The victory was never about being liked. It was about staying loyal to what you were created to do, even when the world misread your intention. Number 4, you became immune to manipulation. Because you outgrew validation. There was a time when you needed to be understood, when approval felt like oxygen and silence felt like rejection. You wanted people to see your heart, to recognize your effort, to clap for the goodness you carried. But one day, you woke up and realized that chasing validation was the fastest way to lose your voice. You saw how people used your desire to be accepted as a leash, pulling it whenever they needed control. And that's when everything changed. The moment you stopped needing applause, you became untouchable. Their opinions lost their bite. Their silence stopped feeling like punishment. You started choosing peace over attention, authenticity over approval. That shift confused them because manipulation only works on those who fear being misunderstood. You stopped explaining yourself, and suddenly the people who once fed off your insecurities had nothing to feed on. They couldn't stand that you no longer needed their permission to be powerful. You found comfort in solitude and purpose in stillness. You learned that validation is addictive. It keeps you performing instead of evolving. Once you broke free from that addiction, no one could buy your loyalty or guilt trip you into compliance again. Now, when people try to twist your truth, you don't panic, you observe. When they try to gaslight you, you stay grounded, because your worth is no longer up for negotiation. You understand that peace is a louder statement than any public defense. You'd rather be misunderstood in truth than celebrated in pretense. That's why the enemy panicked, not because you fought back, but because you stopped reacting. You became unpredictable. You no longer respond to threats, you outlast them. Growth made you immune to games that once drained you. The moment you chose self-respect over approval, every manipulator lost their access. Now you move differently, calm, aware, unshakable, because when validation stops being your fuel, no one can drive your emotions again. Number 5, every attack became a transcript of their fear. The moment you started walking in truth, you triggered the kind of fear that hides behind gossip, shade, and sabotage. They couldn't destroy you, so they tried to distort you. They couldn't stop your rise, so they tried to stain your name. But what they didn't realize is that every attack was documentation, a written record of their insecurity disguised as hate. Their fear leaked through their actions, their tone, their silence. You became the mirror that showed them everything they didn't want to confront within themselves. People rarely hate you for who you are. They hate you for reminding them of what they're not ready to face. Your growth exposed their stagnation. Your peace exposed their chaos. Your consistency revealed their lack of discipline. It was never personal. It was psychological. They saw your evolution as evidence of their excuses, and instead of growing, they decided to throw stones. Every lie they told said more about their fear than your character. Every smear campaign was just them admitting they couldn't compete with authenticity. They wanted to paint you as unstable so they could feel steady next to you. They needed you to look flawed so they could mask their own cracks. But truth has a way of aging well. Time always reveals the handwriting on the wall, and theirs is trembling. You never needed to fight back because exposure has its own rhythm. The truth doesn't rush. It arrives fully dressed. So you stayed silent, kept moving, and let their contradictions pile up until they formed their own confession. You learned that revenge is too expensive when peace is already paying dividends. Now every attack serves as a reference, proof that you were worth fearing. They saw something in you they couldn't copy or control, and that's why they failed, because they were never fighting your actions. They were fighting the evidence of your authenticity. Your existence became their audit, and every attempt to tear you down only revealed how terrified they were of your light. Number 6, they learned too late that you don't fight alone. They thought you were defenseless because they couldn't see your defense. They assumed you were unprotected because you didn't announce who was backing you. You didn't have to shout about your faith or flex your connection. You just moved quietly, and the divine moved louder. What they mistook for vulnerability was actually divine strategy. You were covered, but the covering was invisible to those who relied on proof instead of presence. There were moments when it looked like you were losing, when the odds stacked so high it seemed impossible to climb out. But that was part of the setup. Divine timing always disguises itself as delay. The ones who laughed thought the silence meant you were finished, but they didn't know heaven doesn't panic. The protection around you wasn't noisy, it was precise. When the hit came, it missed. When the trap was set, it collapsed on the one who built it. You didn't need to expose who was for you because your results would do it eventually. That's why the flip looked supernatural. One moment you were surrounded, the next, they were scattered. People who once bragged about your downfall started acting confused about how you're still standing. What they called luck was actually loyalty from the divine realm that refused to let you fail. The reason you still have peace after everything is because you never fought with your own strength. You were backed by something sacred, something they couldn't bribe or block. Every time they plotted, it was recorded. Every time they tried to curse you, it ricocheted. They didn't lose to you. They lost to the force that walks with you. And now they finally understand. You don't fight alone. That's why their weapons jammed, their rumors lost momentum, and their plans collapsed mid-launch. The protection around you was silent, but its results were loud. You were never outnumbered. You were outwatched, outguarded, and outloved by something far greater than what they could ever comprehend. Number 7, you didn't lose people. You lost parasites. The people who walked away didn't leave by accident. They were escorted out by divine timing. You didn't lose them. They were removed for your protection. Every person who drifted, betrayed, ghosted, or switched sides was part of a quiet cleansing that had to happen before elevation could arrive. You didn't realize it then, but their absence was the first sign of your next chapter beginning. God doesn't prune what's dying. He prunes what's growing. For a while, it hurt. You replayed conversations, second-guessed yourself, wondered what you could have done differently. But eventually, you started noticing how peaceful it felt when they were gone. The air got lighter, your thoughts got clearer, and your energy stopped feeling drained. That's when it clicked. You weren't surrounded by supporters. You were surrounded by consumers. They weren't clapping because they believed in you. They were clapping because you were feeding them. Some people don't love you. They love your access. They love what you make them feel, not who you actually are. And when your growth starts threatening their comfort, they'll disguise envy as distance and jealousy as space. But don't grieve it. You were never meant to take everybody with you. Some were only assigned to the version of you that needed lessons, not the one that's walking in purpose. The divine doesn't expose parasites with drama. It exposes them with silence. They simply stop fitting, stop vibing, stop aligning. They'll think they chose to leave, but really the energy evicted them. Because what's ahead requires loyalty that can't be bought or blackmailed. You need people who protect your name in rooms you've never entered, not ones who study your weaknesses to weaponize them later. So no, you didn't lose anything valuable. You were detoxed. The exits were divine edits. The emptiness they left was actually space being cleared for real ones to arrive. You don't mourn what's toxic. You thank God it left before your next season began. Number 8, their longest strategy failed. Because you stopped playing their game. They spent months, even years, studying your emotions, how to trigger you, how to guilt you, how to pull you back into chaos just to prove they still had influence. Every insult, every setup, every whisper campaign was designed to provoke a reaction. They didn't want your downfall. They wanted your distraction, because the moment you react, you forfeit control. But then something shifted. You stopped entertaining their drama. You stopped explaining, defending, and arguing. You realized the game only works when you play it, and that realization ruined their entire plan. They had rehearsed your meltdown in their heads. They imagined you breaking, crying, snapping, or begging, but instead you got quiet, not out of weakness, but out of awareness. You finally understood that silence doesn't mean defeat. It means discernment. You learned that not every battle is worth attendance, especially when the other side is committed to misunderstanding you. The moment you refused to engage, they lost access to your energy. And without your reaction, their manipulation went bankrupt. They didn't know how to handle your peace. It confused them. They kept poking, testing, and waiting for the old you to resurface. But you were gone. You grew out of the need to prove your point. You started valuing your peace more than your pride. And when they realized nothing they did could pull you out of alignment, their power dissolved. Now they sit in the echo of their own noise, replaying old strategies that no longer work. Because you broke the algorithm, you stopped responding to chaos. You outsmarted the manipulation by refusing to feed it. That's when the tables turned. The silence that once made them think they won became the evidence that you did. And while they were busy plotting your reaction, you were busy planning your future. Their strategy didn't fail because it was weak. It failed because you grew wiser. Number 9, you carried the war quietly, so others could sleep peacefully. There are battles no one will ever know you fought, nights no one will ever know you cried, and decisions no one will ever know you made in silence to keep things from falling apart. You carried weight that wasn't yours because you knew what would happen if you dropped it. You stood between chaos and collapse, taking the impact so others could live in comfort. That's the paradox of the chosen. You're often the protector who never gets protected, the healer who rarely gets healed. While others slept peacefully, you were awake, making peace possible. You absorbed tension, diffused conflict, kept families, friendships, and teams from breaking, and yet most people never noticed. They thought you were fine because you didn't complain. They thought you had it easy because you made hard things look effortless. What they didn't realize was that every calm day they enjoyed was sponsored by your invisible battles. You learned early that leadership isn't about titles. It's about sacrifice. You were built to handle what would crush others, not because you wanted to, but because you were chosen to. And it's a lonely calling. The people you protect rarely understand what it costs to keep them safe from spiritual, emotional, or even relational collapse. They see the peace, not the price. But here's the truth. Every burden you carried trained you to operate on a higher level. You became emotionally strategic, spiritually alert, and mentally resilient. You learned how to fight in silence and still move with grace. You didn't need witnesses, you needed wisdom. You stopped seeking credit because you realized peace itself was the reward. The world may never fully grasp how much you've carried, but heaven does. The unseen doesn't go unnoticed. And because you carried the war quietly, divine balance will now carry you. Those who slept while you fought will soon realize that their safety had a name, and it was yours. Number 10, every betrayal upgraded your discernment. At first, betrayal felt like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. You questioned everything, your instincts, your trust, your own judgment. But over time, you realized that every betrayal wasn't just a heartbreak, it was a masterclass. It forced you to see people for who they are, not who you wanted them to be. It stripped away illusion and replaced it with insight. What used to break you now teaches you. What once shocked you now prepares you. You no longer get blindsided because you've learned to listen beyond words. Words can charm, but energy never lies. You've learned to pay attention to tone, timing, patterns, and pauses. You can feel dishonesty before it's spoken, and distance before it's declared. That's not paranoia. That's discernment. Betrayal sharpened your senses. It taught you that not every smile is sincere and not every apology is repentance. You stopped mistaking consistency for loyalty, and you stopped confusing history for trust. Now you move with observation, not assumption. You don't argue with frequencies that don't match your spirit anymore. When something feels off, you step back instead of explaining it away. You've outgrown the need to prove that your intuition is right, because it always is. You don't need closure from people who never had honesty to begin with. Their betrayal was the revelation, and that's enough. The greatest gift betrayal gave you was emotional X-ray vision. You can sense motives, spot manipulation, and detect spiritual misalignment without confrontation. You've become fluent in truth without needing translation. That's what happens when you've been hurt deeply but healed correctly. You see everything differently. Now peace is your filter. You let energy introduce people before their words do. You don't chase clarity. You attract it through alignment. The betrayal didn't end you. It upgraded you. It turned you into someone who no longer walks blind but walks wise. Someone who can sense danger wrapped in charm and still choose peace over participation. Number 11, you outlasted them. Because you were built for seasons, not moments. They were loud while it lasted, flashing, competing, performing, but noise has an expiration date. You, on the other hand, weren't in it for the spotlight. You were being built quietly, consistently, with a foundation meant to last beyond trends and temporary attention. They had momentum, but you had maintenance. Momentum makes noise for a while, but maintenance keeps you standing when the crowd gets bored. That's the difference between people who rise fast and those who rise right. You learned early that longevity demands patience. While others sprinted for quick wins, you were building rhythm. You focused on growth that couldn't be undone by gossip, rejection, or public opinion. That's why you're still standing. You didn't rely on hype. You relied on habits. You didn't chase validation. You cultivated value. And when the applause faded, you didn't. Because your strength wasn't borrowed, it was built. The storms that took others out only deepened your roots. You've been through seasons where everything looked dormant. Friendships changed, doors closed, energy shifted. Yet you stayed grounded. You didn't need to be seen to keep growing. The roots were doing the work long before the fruit showed up. And that's why no storm could uproot you. You were anchored in something more stable than circumstances. They couldn't understand how you kept showing up after setbacks, how you kept rebuilding after loss. It's because you were never built for a moment. You were designed for a mission. Hype fades, but purpose doesn't. You've endured the dry seasons that scared others away, and that's why you'll harvest what they only dreamed of. Now they're realizing it. You were never in competition with them. You were in preparation for something timeless. You outlasted them because you were never meant to trend. You were meant to transform. And when the dust settles, what's rooted will always remain. Number 12, you never needed revenge. You became the reminder. You stopped trying to make people regret how they treated you. You realized the best response to betrayal wasn't destruction. It was demonstration. Every time you healed instead of lashed out, you built a kind of power they couldn't touch. You became the reminder that no weapon formed against you prospers. Not because you retaliated, but because you refused to shrink. Your peace became the loudest comeback anyone could deliver. They expected chaos, but you gave them calm. They expected you to crumble, but you became unbothered. They were waiting to see your downfall, but what they witnessed instead was your evolution. And that was the justice, not vengeance, not payback, but the undeniable proof that you couldn't be stopped. Every win, every healed smile, every opportunity that came after the damage they tried to cause is a message they can't delete. It didn't work. Revenge would have kept you trapped in their energy, but grace elevated you beyond it. You stopped needing them to acknowledge the harm because your growth already exposed it. You learned that peace is the most uncomfortable punishment for people who expected you to fall apart. It reminds them daily that their efforts were wasted, that your resilience can't be rewritten, and that their chapter in your story didn't end with control. It ended with closure. Now you move freely while they're stuck explaining why you're still standing. Your existence is the reminder they didn't win. The tables didn't just turn, they transformed. The more you thrive, the more their intentions look foolish. That's divine irony. They became the architects of their own regret by trying to destroy what was divinely protected. You never needed revenge because you became the evidence. You're the walking headline of what grace looks like when it refuses to die. Every breath you take in peace is a silent announcement. Favor can't be hacked, destiny can't be delayed, and the same ones who plotted against you are now forced to watch the very story they tried to erase unfold beautifully without them. Number 13. You learned that exposure is better than closure. You stopped chasing explanations from people who already knew what they did. At some point, you realized that closure from liars is just another layer of manipulation. They'll twist the story again just to feel in control. So you let go of the need to be understood. You gave truth the time it needed to breathe, because truth always ages better than deceit. What they thought they buried was just planted, and now it's sprouting in full view. For a long time, you wanted to confront them, to make them admit what they did, to clear your name, to fix the narrative. But wisdom taught you that exposure works better than confrontation. You didn't have to fight for vindication, you just had to stay consistent. And while you kept walking in integrity, their contradictions started unraveling on their own. The same people who tried to destroy your reputation eventually became the evidence that validated you. They don't even realize that their behavior now preaches the very truth they tried to hide. Closure is temporary, exposure is final. Closure satisfies the ego, but exposure satisfies justice. When the truth comes out on its own, no one can argue timing, tone, or context. It just stands, undeniable and unshakable. That's why you stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You knew that silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. And now, it's happening. The truth is surfacing naturally, without your effort. People are connecting dots you never had to point out. Lies are collapsing under the weight of consistency. What was meant to embarrass you has turned into your elevation. The same mouths that gossiped are now whispering apologies they'll never say aloud. You learned that you don't need closure from deceit. You need confirmation from time, and time never fails. It exposes what words can't defend. You didn't lose by walking away. You won by letting truth do the talking. Number 14. You didn't win because you were the strongest. You won because you were chosen. You didn't make it through because you had the most resources, the loudest voice, or the biggest support system. You made it because you were chosen for an assignment that couldn't be interrupted. The odds were never in your favor, but favor doesn't ask for permission. What you carried on the inside was always greater than what came against you. The battle was never fair. That's exactly why you won. People kept trying to figure out how you're still standing after everything that was meant to finish you. They can't explain it because it doesn't make logical sense. Every strategy they used should have worked. Every door they slammed should have stopped you. But when something is divinely ordered, human interference becomes irrelevant. You weren't being kept by luck. You were being sustained by purpose. That's the thing about being chosen. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It means you're protected for a reason. The hits still come, but they don't land the same. The traps still form, but they fall apart before you step into them. You don't walk with arrogance. You walk with awareness that your survival is evidence of a promise too powerful to be broken. They thought they were fighting a person, but they were really fighting a prophecy. That's why nothing they did could stick. You weren't operating in your own strength. You were operating in assignment. And when destiny has your name on it, even opposition becomes part of the design. You didn't win because you were the toughest. You won because heaven had already decided you would. The favor on your life rewrote the outcome long before the attack began. Every setback only confirmed that you were unstoppable, not because of what you did, but because of who sent you. That's the real story. Chosen ones don't always win easily, but they always win eventually. Conclusion: the failure of their warfare became the proof of your worth. When you look back on everything you've endured, the attacks, the betrayals, the rumors, the seasons of silence, you begin to see a pattern that only divine wisdom could design. Nothing was random. Every delay, every disappointment, every person who turned on you was a part of a greater filtering process. You weren't being punished. You were being positioned. You weren't losing battles. You were learning blueprints. They thought they were destroying your path, but they were actually directing you toward it. You've lived through chapters that would have broken anyone else, and yet here you are, stronger, clearer, more dangerous in your peace than you've ever been in your pain. The same situations that once had you on your knees now bow to your growth. You didn't just survive, you evolved. You went from being reactive to being refined, from being misunderstood to being undeniable. That's what divine selection looks like. Unexplainable endurance wrapped in quiet authority. You've learned that being chosen doesn't mean being celebrated. It means being set apart. It means carrying battles others can't see, walking roads others can't handle, and still finding a way to smile when everything around you screams defeat. But the truth is, they never stood a chance against you. You were covered before they even conspired. Their longest plans failed because your purpose outlasted their patience. They thought they were attacking a person. They were provoking a prophecy, and prophecy doesn't lose. It fulfills itself. Now this is your confirmation. You are entering the season where what was hidden will be honored. Every quiet victory will be seen. Every injustice will be corrected by exposure, not effort. You are proof that grace can't be sabotaged and destiny can't be delayed. The storm didn't end you, it revealed you. And that revelation is what they'll never recover from. If this message spoke to you, if it reminded you of your strength, your purpose, or your resilience, then take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, comment your testimony below, and share it with someone who needs to remember who they are. Because chosen ones don't just survive the storm, they redefine it. Stay blessed always.